and welcome to the Zurich Zone. My name is Nitya Bhutani, and today I'm joined by Ericson Chan, the Group Chief Information and Digital Officer at Zurich Group, and also by Shaneen Marshall, the Chief of Tech and Strategy for us in Zurich, Australia and New Zealand. So today we're going to be talking about innovation, especially in the context of financial services and insurance, but also in the context of your roles, right? How technology is kind of leading organizations to innovate as well as foster a culture of innovation. So that's something that, we're very excited to talk about today. So let's start off with kind of your journeys, right? And how you sort of came about in the world of tech, in the world of insurance. And it's very interesting because both of you come from very different markets, right? Ericson, you were at Ping An before. Shaneen, you were in South Africa before. Very different from an innovation perspective. And now, you're driving innovation not just in the context of a big group, but also in the context of a BU. So maybe, Ericson, we'll start with you, just kind of hear about your journey and what got you here.
We talk about innovation, we talk about technology. How did I get into technology? My first job, actually, it was a part-time job when I was with Esprit. Esprit, the ladies will know, fashion outlet.
Yeah.
And I was quite intrigued at that moment how they, as soon as we sold a piece of garment, within a couple of hours, they can replenish to the floor. And that was quite some time ago. So you can imagine that was my first job. It was quite some time ago. I was quite intrigued about that. And then when I started to find out a little bit more, it was because of the computer system that they have. Everything's connected.
Right.
So that is how I started to get into this area.
Okay. And then after that, all the way from Ping An to Zurich.
You wouldn't have the time for this long stories. And so it's a long time. How about you?
I started off my career in South Africa as a baby actuary, which is a little bit further from where I am now. But I think as I progressed, I learned that you needed to gather the important skill sets and capabilities in the domains that really helped move things, which is obviously technology. Yeah. So I was lucky in that I got the opportunity to start an insurer inside a bank, and part of starting an insurer was picking an IT system and implementing it. So I really had to learn a lot about that. And that's actually what got me really excited about technology, but also what made me realize you can do nothing without technology. And so, I've gone on a journey of kind of collecting all of those skills across different markets to make sure that you have all those capabilities to really make a difference. But I guess if I go back to my personal journey, the thing that really gives me motivation to innovate and to push through is when I was 11, my mum got diagnosed with cancer, but a really bad form of cancer, and we nearly lost her. And an insurer shed a bit of light for my family during that time, and I just want to shed that little bit of light in dark times for everyone else. And I think, our topic today is innovation, and innovation takes grit and resilience, and I think if you have the right purpose, then you get there. So that's probably the most important part of my personal journey. But picking up some of the skills along the way.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Okay. And then just kind of going back to, your roles in the context of Zurich in kind of driving this transformation and driving this change. And it's great to have both of you because, Ericson, you're doing this at a group level, right, across all the different markets we operate in. And Shaneen, you're on the receiving end of it, where you're kind of working with Ericson and his team on really mobilizing this on the ground for the countries. So walk us through a little bit of, where is Zurich on this journey and how are we using technology to drive innovation in insurance?
Is this where we get to? Is Australia doing the right thing?
I'll answer that later on. So I think technology often linked with innovations, but they should not be. Sometimes innovation does not necessarily has to involve technology. So, but I think to tackle this, we need to look at it from top down and also bottom up approach. Top down. What do I mean? as top down is we need to look at which area is we need to try to resolve a problem, provide better customer service. What pain point that we have in the business, in the value chain that we are operating, is an opportunity to get improved. So at the end of the day, innovation does not deliver value, doesn't mean anything. So we need to understand the business really well first, and then that is the top-down approach, and know where are the opportunity. And then at the same time, you mentioned about technology and innovation, then we need to understand the potential of all the different technologies out there. So, and then therefore, if you know the capability, like recently everybody talk about AI, generative AI, but exactly what generative AI can do for us, once you understand that, and then we need to combine the two. In many ways, the bottom-up approach is almost like a solutions or a set of solutions looking for problems. So, but then top-down approach, you know where are your problems. Once you match the two, that will work. Without this, and you always kind of miss the mark.
Right.
And if I may, one more thing is we run in the insurance industry, but we don't need to always innovate from scratch. We can often look at our other industry out there, ranging from retail and to other, that they have similar use case that can apply to our industry. So it's a good thing when I top-down approach. Another way is make sure we pay attention what others are doing, not only about peers, it's other industry out there, other markets. So
yeah. Can I just pick up on two things there? The one is the external perspective, right? And I think particularly in an industry that's so old and has such tenure, we've developed practices which have been there for a very long time, and for a good reason, because we're in the business of risk. So you need data to understand and price, and but when you look at the pace of change right now, it's changing faster than we've ever seen before. And therefore, does that large amount of data that you have for so many years, is it even relevant anymore? And we've really got the pace of change is so different. And so I think the need to look externally and the need to be, to actually move faster is really increasing. And that's, I think, one of the key things that you need for innovation is external thinking. And some of that comes from diversity. So it comes from diversity in age, diversity in gender, diversity in cultural background, and diversity in industry. Not just necessarily hiring the easy hire of someone in insurance, but hiring someone who potentially has no background in it, but looks at the world quite differently. So I think that that's an interesting perspective on how do we actually externalize some of our thinking, particularly given the current landscape.
Yeah. And external also the customer. The customer expectations are very, very different these days because they get used to different level of service, tailored service in other industry, other products. They will start to expect all other industry, including insurance, should offer the product service similarly.
Hugely. And COVID played a big role in accelerating that.
Yeah, absolutely. Easily by 10 years, the expectation.
It's amazing, Yeah, just I guess from a group perspective to your question about local versus group, I think being part of a global organization is incredible because you get the benefit as Zurich, and the way that Ericson was explaining that, you get the benefit of understanding your context and your customer and your big use cases or problems that you have to solve. But you can also turn to your peers in the group to actually support with a solution. And I think that's the benefit of both worlds. And if we get the real right balance in that, I think there's incredible power in that. And that approach is really important. But I think, and we've been talking about this before, it's execution that's really important. And so I think locally in Australia, we realized that we needed a new operating model in order to execute faster, better, to make decisions closer to the customer. So we've been more focused on the how we go about it. And then I think now we're in a position where we can really take those solutions and actually execute in that space. So it's interesting how you need to look at both.
Yeah. And talk us through a little bit more about that operating model shift that you mentioned, right? Because as Ericson also said, yes, technology is one enabler of driving change and innovation and fostering that culture, but there's so many other elements that kind of go along with that. So maybe you just kind of elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about the style of leadership that has existed for a long time and still exists today, that you sit in a boardroom and you decide on what are the strategic priorities and what everyone's going to do, and then you give it to everybody, and then everybody does it. How does that create the space or ability for people to innovate? And so if you and I think that is almost some of the center points of how do you empower people who actually know the customer, they know the solutions better than anyone in a boardroom can ever design, and how do you create that empowerment for people? How do you get that mindset shift of the growth mindset, and how do you create the right level of accountability and guardrails and context in an organization that allows that to thrive? And so I think, if you think about how organizations are moving in terms of how they set up, and you can look to all of the startups that are successful in terms of how they set themselves up, you've got to look at how we take our large organizations to shift more towards that way of leadership and thinking. And I think as a leader, particularly if you've led your whole life a certain way, to really change the way you act in terms of giving problems and outcomes, not solutions and tasks, it's a real shift in mindset. So I think, a big shift is on how you lead and how you empower people to innovate. And that's a real big thing that we've been focused on in Australia for a while. And it's unlocking amazing ideas and opportunities, and just seeing people thrive and actually execute things is amazing. So that is one part of it. But the other part is just, if I think about in all the times in my career where I've tried to innovate, there's a few characteristics of things where it's succeeded. And one of it is focus. So, you try and innovate on the side of your desk, right? You've got your BAU to do, you've got this thing that happens, and then you've got this new shiny thing to do, which is actually really hard, takes a lot of thought, takes a lot of brain power, and you can't really find a solution. And so it just stays there. You actually focus on your day-to-day. And so, where you've actually got focused attention on those things, you end up getting a lot more out of it. And so we've created the space, I guess, and the focus in terms of driving value that allows people to focus on an outcome. And we've set up cross-functional teams that allow them to then think about what are the best solutions for the outcome. And we brought them closer to the customer that they serve. So there's a lot to unpack in that, but I think those are some of the principles around innovating is a different way of leading and a different way of structuring teams to allow for focus.
If I tag on that, I think it's absolutely right. You need to give accountability, you give space, guardrail, so that the team got a chance to be successful. And then afterwards, for an organization like us, a multinational organization is large, how can we take that learnings, take that success case and multiply across the region, multiply across the group? That is another level of focus we also need to do. We need to encourage knowledge exchange, best practice sharing, not only best practice sharing, but best practice adoption. That is the key. So it's similar to startup, right? Startup is difficult enough, as you just described. How do you go from an idea, which is, I would call it a zero, to something going live, successful? Then you go to one. But for an organization like Zurich, so it's not go from 0 to 1 is not enough. How can you take it from 1 to 2, 3, and then 1 to N? That is the tough part, which is what we are trying to do these days. And then I think particularly because this is for APAC. APAC has the, I won't call it advantage, but it has the right ingredients to try the culture, the ingredients, the atmosphere. You can push a bit further because of the customer adaptability and the demand for the customer in the APAC tends to be willing to try more new things. So I think there's a lot, not only within Australia, but within APAC has a lot of things to offer. Once APAC becomes successful, then we can take this to other markets and other regions. So it's not straightforward, but the price is big if we get it right.
Yeah. And I think in South Africa, it's quite similar in terms of developing nation to APAC, right? And I see so many similarities.
Emerging markets.
Definitely. And what you see there is a culture of, particularly in the employees, but also in the customers, a culture of adversity. As soon as you've struggled through adversity, you've overcome, you've had to change. There's new emerging things that you have to overcome all the time. And it actually breeds a culture of innovation. And then when we, as an organization, I think fostering some of that is incredible. What you can actually achieve with that versus, and I think some of the struggles in Australia is they've had stable economic growth for many years. And so you didn't need to innovate. I mean, there's lots of innovations that have come out of Australia, but as an insurance company, you could make money without needing to innovate that much. And so...
Not for long.
No, I know, right? Now it's really different, the landscape in Australia now in terms of the regulation, and now we're forced to do it. But it's interesting how that cultural element plays a big role.
Yeah. And it's interesting because both of you mentioned China, right? And it's really been on the forefront of innovation in a lot of ways when it comes to insurance. But we haven't necessarily seen that translate to outside of China. And Ericson, given your experience working in China, right, being at the center of all the insurance companies innovating, how do you kind of draw those parallels? What are some of the lessons that, you feel you can take from what's happening, how technology has enabled it, how, all of the macro kind of customer factors that we discussed have also enabled it to now working for more of a global organization?
Yeah, I think a little bit different if I look at this, because it's what is happening in China actually similarly is happening in a number of emerging markets. If you look at Indonesia, if you look at India these days, they are very, very innovative. They run really fast. Yeah. I think the thing is China has a slight advantage because of the scale that they have. It's just because, the mass customer base. So you can do a lot more testing of what the market is ready for. And then you can see that right now because India share a lot of those attributes, and now it's all happening. Whereas I think the difference is more so between emerging market and the developed market, as you were saying earlier. Because developed market, the urgency is less so, but most importantly, because they are very... there is a legacy investment, a legacy infrastructure, and also the customer is very comfortable with their existing practice. So then we need to learn from the emerging market and address some of the needs that even the customer has not been asking for. That is the trick. So of course, we all always say that we need to listen to what the customer wants. Sometimes the customer might not be able to articulate what they want yet. So we need to learn from the emerging market and apply those learnings to the developed market these days.
Take your customer on the journey, right?
Yeah. And then some of the best example would be Apple.
Yeah.
Apple is time and time again. I know we always use Apple, maybe too often, but then they genuinely able to do that.
Yeah.
To offer things that is customer yet to ask for, but it is something that the customer wants.
Yeah. So two things, right? Building on what you said, how do you, in your role, then are able to strike that balance between the needs of emerging markets versus developed markets, right? Because we operate across both, and there is a wide spectrum of differences. And then also, I think both of you have mentioned that, when you work for large organizations and insurance companies, and we have a history of 150 years, right? We come with a lot of legacy challenges as well, and it's not always easy kind of overcoming that. So you may have an organization that wants to be innovative, but, that there may be challenges in being able to drive that.
No, I think it's innovation at the end is a culture, is a mindset. So are are you consistently trying to find some newer ways or differentiated ways to offer customer more values? So I think from that perspective, if we have this mindset, this culture, regardless as emerging market or developed market, we can all get there. And then what we do here, trying to get the learnings between the two, and then make sure we get share across. And we were just discussed that the other earlier. How can we even productize? What it means by productize, basically whatever we have done once, in one market, so then we can introduce to all the other markets.
Make it scalable.
Quickly, make it scale. That's right.
And it goes both ways, developed to emerging, right? Because you get benefits from both. But I think to your point of legacy, I think you almost think sometimes legacy really holds you back, but legacy actually even forces you to innovate more, right? Because you've got to figure out how to work within the legacy constraints to innovate around that, So we've got, every life insurer has a legacy back-end platform, right? And so to try and get rid of that is so hard because it's massively expensive and really risky. But to try and innovate around, how do you take out maybe parts of it over time to reduce your reliance on it? And to take a part of a legacy system out is really hard. And so actually it almost makes innovation, it makes it even more important to innovate, but not in the things that people find sexy to innovate in. It's actually innovate in some of the real foundational things, which I think needs to be a priority too. And I think, like I said earlier, you've got to create the space and the prioritization for people to actually do that.
And sometimes innovation is not just using technology to make things more efficient and what the customer want. We can even we are starting to look at how we offer almost like a different business model out there to prepare for the future of insurance, right? So quite often we are now not only using technology to focus on the product and service, but provide additional preventative practice for our customers. This is a whole different way of innovations. It's not just making our existing approach better. It's over something that we were not doing previously. And without technology, you cannot even do that at scale. So, and you asked about China, I think, or the emerging market, they look at retail insurance quite differently. So instead of selling a policy alone, they can use technology means and innovating so that they can engage the customer, or in this case, engage the user and turn a user into the customer. This is no different than a lot of the technology company is doing. So it's a freemium model so that you can get to know the customer better first. So before we introduce the fit for this particular customer product. So this is all another kind of innovation. Is open a whole new approach. And we Zurich Insurance have been doing it in a commercial insurance side already. But you cannot do that without technology, so to scale for the retail segment. Now we can do that. That is another way of innovating.
Yeah, so it's like the Zurich Resilience Solutions, risk engineering in the general insurance side, but then also health and prevention on the life side.
That's right.
And just to pick up on that prevention topic, if we think about innovation, life insurance puts you on a curve, depending on your age and gender and very few factors. That curve is usually really old and adjusted. I am an actuary, I can say these things, and adjusted slightly. And then that's the curve you're on for life, no matter what happens, and you definitely change. And we haven't actually changed that for forever. And so actually your profile, your risk changes so much over time. And we don't really adjust for that. Obviously, the pool is adjusts for it in general. But how do we actually innovate around that, particularly in the world of Gen AI, where you know so much more about people? But then to Ericson's earlier point, it's that customers in different regions have different appetites for that, particularly data. And the trade-off between, how much data are you willing to give someone and the value that you get back from it and the trust that you have. And so I also think that if we are going to innovate in this space, like reinvent life insurance, for example, you have to have a significant amount of trust, and you have to give that value trade-off to your customers. And that's a really interesting thing that no one's really got right in that space.
Once you get the trust from the customer, then not only after you sell the insurance, we continue to work with the customer, make them healthier,
Totally.
well-being, and then this all can only be done with technology. So otherwise it won't scale. So then it's become a win-win situation for the customer and for us.
Yeah. And we almost know more about a customer than, for example, a health insurer would as a life insurer, because you underwrite and you ask a bunch of questions, so you know proactively more. The health insurer knows something after something has already happened. And so we have the real ability to actually intervene. And as with general insurance, we have the ability to risk, to help them manage and monitor their risk.
Yep.
Yeah. I like the whole thing around preventative services, right? Because yes, you can help the customer, but not just before they get something, but also after they've got it. Because if you can help them manage their conditions, it can also, allow them to be included in the future, which is a bit of an issue in emerging markets right now, is that, people with conditions don't really have an option. It's all out-of-pocket spend.
Yep.
So is there a way to kind of use this ecosystem, Ericson and Shaneen, that you guys are talking about, or technology to actually broaden the pie, broaden inclusion, right? So there's almost a real purpose out there of actually pushing this as well.
Totally, yeah.
And this apply in all different lines, from life insurance to even cyber insurance. And then how can we make sure our customers is more secure instead of just trying to sell the cyber insurance?
Yeah.
So it's applicable for everything we do.
Yeah, rehabilitation and prevention.
Yep.
And we actually see, we have a lot of data on that in terms of what actually gets people, we have a huge income protection portfolio in Australia, and you see the data on what actually gets people back to work. And it's not that we just want people to back to work so that we can stop paying. It's actually, there's real evidence around people returning to the workforce is really great for their mental health and them returning to health. And so how do you work together to achieve that? And we can see what works and what doesn't work. And so how can you use that information to actually really help customers rehabilitate? And I think from what you said, that's a real community good in terms of making sure that we are equitable.
Yeah. Some real use cases for us, right? To kind of use our 150 years of data to push something. Okay. So just also kind of, you guys touched upon Gen AI as well, and that is the hot topic. It's been the hot topic for the last kind of 12 months, ever since ChatGPT came on the block. So how are we dealing with both the risks as well as the opportunities that are coming our way with the rise of generative AI? And, what are we starting to experiment with as an organization as well?
I can go on and on this. Do you want to say something? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So Gen AI, well, first of all, AI is not new. So, but then it's Gen AI's capture everyone's imagination. Because previously, I think in the last 10 years, AI has progressed a lot. And even, I would say, around 2015, 2016, there's a whole load of AI coming out. And from facial recognition to gesture, that does not capture the imagination of everyone. Because facial recognition actually technically is even harder. But then it is the intelligence is no difference than a 1 or 2 years old kid to recognize who is the mother, who is the mom, is the pop. But Gen AI right now it touched the nerves of us, because it's seemingly is almost sentient, is able to think. Yeah. But the fact is it doesn't. It's a prediction model. It's a prediction model that, based on what you have said or the sentence, it just predicts the next word. But it predicts the next word really, really smartly, I would say. So for us, we need to understand the potential which we do, what we can use it for. And because insurance is a knowledge industry, so we process a lot of data. And in the past, what we have been very good at is process structured data, numbers. We have been doing that for many years. You mentioned about live actuary. That is what we are very, very good at. And what this generative AI is now allow us to do is process unstructured data, which is text, documents. So, and then how are we going to take advantage of it? Your question is, so we need to look at which area. Again, as like what I was saying at the beginning, top down and bottom up. Which bottom up is that we know the capability of this Gen AI. Besides writing a song, a poem, but then what was the capability? The capability is able to understand massive amount of text and then to generate insight and information. So from that, and then we need to look at top down, which area we can apply this kind of technology, this kind of Gen AI technology. Then once we match it, which we are doing that, and then that is where the values will come. There's opportunity. You mentioned about balance the risk. Yes, you would have heard about this as because hallucination or fake news, fake this information. So we are taking a more cautious approach because this is still new. So we want to make sure everything we do is keeping human in the loop. So it's man in the middle. So we still use the Gen AI as a assistive technology. So to assist what we do that even better, do that in a more productive way. But instead of using the model to talk to the customer directly, liaise with the direct, someday we will. But I think the technology is so new, we are all still learning. So to make sure we have the fail-safe all built in before we go straight to the customer today, and then we make sure this is helping our call center agent, helping our underwriter, risk engineer, claim adjuster, using those scenario. So this is the way we balance it.
Got it. Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like you say, it's an incredible solution waiting for a problem to solve. And I think in some areas, and I can see people finding a problem for the solution to solve as opposed to what are the real problems we need to solve and then how can this help us solve it. So I think there's been a lot of excitement and now it's like, what are the big areas of opportunity that we can then use it to solve? I think, Ericson, you've mentioned most of them. It's in making our really skilled people even more efficient and productive. We have incredible underwriters, we have incredible claims managers, and we got incredible people talking to our customers. But how do we give them all the information that they need to make a decision really easily and probably even with better quality than they could have themselves, because you can't read every single document and do everything. So, how can we just read in all the documentation, give it all and say, this is what we would do, but you can go and dig into it. So I think those are really where the power is in terms of making our teams more efficient. And I think, what we need to look at is where is there something that we need to build ourselves because that's our IP and that's, that's incredible versus where do we just adopt technology that everyone else is working on. And that's a real, really important decision in innovation. Where do you actually use as an accelerator something that you buy versus where do you actually build it yourselves? And that's an interesting debate internally because everyone just wants to go off with data scientists and build something. But as Ericson said, it's scary what can happen if you don't do it properly. Yeah. And even if you buy it, the same scary things can happen. So how can you make sure that you have, I've built models before and now you've got to monitor the models all the time to check that they work. It's not just a once-off QA of a model. It's just a continuous model. And I can just envision, model checking teams, and how do you do that? And so we've seen robots checking robots, and no, that's not the right thing. How you're going to have AI checking AI, so it's really scary what can happen if you don't operationalize it correctly. So I think it really just opens a whole new door for the opportunities that we can solve our problems much faster in a much better way.
I think the industry is getting better now. The whole industry has learned, I would say, compared with, let's say, social media. Previously, it wasn't. I think there's a lot of lessons learned we can do from the regulator government these days, how to make sure that it's safer. And as a commercial organization, also we have responsibility. We also need to help the industry, how to, based on our learnings, how to make sure it's safe not only for ourselves, for the rest of the industry, and do a little bit promotion here. So Zurich, like about 2-3 weeks ago, we have announced to work with a number of big tech companies, including Amazon, Google, Microsoft, SAP, and so forth, and form an AI red teaming network. What that is similar to, took the concept from cybersecurity red teaming. So when a foundational model being built by one of the technology company, how can we make sure it's safe, the foundational model? So we ethically hack the model like we hack the cybersecurity use case to see if it's hackable. So that is one of the ways that we can be a bit more proactive to manage the risk. So there's different things that we learn from cybersecurity industry, learn from the proactive regulations from the social media, not quite managed industry. And then, so when we combine, I do feel that we are a little bit ahead this time around, which is positive.
Yeah, and that's why in this region it's really great to be part of a global organization and have both some of the work that's done in our security teams globally, but also in AI now, and we able to leverage that for our organizations, which really, really helps. And I mean, I talk to some of our peers, and it is a real benefit because, you know, locally they might have to build it themselves, and we can just use it globally. So I think it's a real benefit. Thanks, Ericson.
It's team effort.
Yeah.
It's all the experts that we have.
Okay, and so where to from here, right? As we kind of continue to build on AI, generative AI, and we've talked about a few other trends as well. What do you guys see as kind of the next in insurance?
Okay, I think next of insurance, I think we briefly touch on what's next in general. I think we need to really prepare our staff force to be ready. So it is changing the way we work. How do we leverage these technologies appropriately and know how to best use it? And also, how do we upskill our employees today? Because every roles that we have will be different going forward. So, and then at the same time, there will be new opportunities opening up. So we need to, I think what is next is if you ask me one key thing we need to do next is to get our employee, our staff force to be ready for this next wave of change.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say something similar, but adoption and execution.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a lot of ideas now generated out of some of the new technology, and now it's about actually what we do with it. And if we as organizations, you know, that are significant in scale don't use it and do incredible things with it to improve our processes and delight our customers, then others will and start taking, you know, parts of the value chain. And so I think that's now about execution and using it. And I think, you know, Zurich is on the front foot of some of that, but it's about execution and adoption, which includes upskilling people. It includes finding the right use cases. And so I think that's what's next. It's not, you know, I think the game has been changed now. It's now about playing it.
So just to pick up on this topic that both of you have talked about, right, which is upskilling of staff, let's talk about it a little bit more. And how do you really see that shifting? And Shaneen, you mentioned as well, right, that you're thinking about hiring people who bring certain capabilities from completely different industries who don't even know insurance. So maybe let's talk about how that can actually help us play a bit more of a role, or if there's something else that you see in upskilling as well.
I think from my perspective, you know, there's the upskilling that you'd think about, but then I think there's the business model transformation that actually upskills people in different skill sets, because your job isn't linear anymore. I think, you know, we need to create more T-shaped individuals that have multiple skills, which would help actually adoption of some of these technologies. You've got to understand how technology works in order to implement it. So almost everybody needs to understand that. So, you know, I think in terms of business models, you got to bring different groups of resources together that can learn from each other. So business people and tech people working together in the same team to really get the adoption to work. Because as Ericson was saying, it's not just the tech, it's also got to be the right use case and it's got to be the right business model. So I think, from our perspective, we've spent a lot of time and effort making sure that we have the right skill sets together with a common mission that allows them to execute on a task. And with that, they can then start the adoption. So upskilling from my perspective is actually more of how do we create leaders and individuals that are multi-skilled that can actually look for innovations in it, but also understand the customer. So even our technology teams need to understand the customers that they're serving even better. So bringing that all closer together is something that's really important. So that's probably top of mind for me in terms of upskilling staff.
Yeah.
The only thing I can add is besides upskilling is the mentality. Then I pick on the word that you used earlier, which is a growth mindset. I think we need to have this mindset, this attitude across the whole organization. With that, the continuous improvement, the curiosity to try to understand what is happening out there. This kind of mentality can only led by example, led from the top. If the leaders is carry this attribute, this attitude, it will trigger the whole organization, things like that. Then that will be the day that we don't even need to talk about innovation, but we all are innovating every day.
It's in your blood.
We do. Yeah, it's the genes in the blood.
And it's interesting as you get to age and diversity. The younger people are adopting this technology much faster, and so if you want to remain relevant in the workforce, you've really got to know and understand some of these technologies. But how do you learn from age diversity at the same time, and how can we make sure that we create these, we use the skills that have been learned over a long period of time and augment that with some of these new ways of thinking. And I think it's thinking about that a little bit more, because there's benefits to both and you bring it together. So and all of that's got to be a growth mindset from all sides. You've got to be willing to learn and do things differently. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Okay, so change is here, change is coming, right? We all need to adopt, we all need to adapt, and it's been kind of a great conversation for me and hopefully everyone who's watching and listening in. So thank you, Ericson, and thank you, Shaneen, for joining us and for being here.
Thanks,
Thank
Nitya.
you.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. It was great.
Chat.